I woke to a sharp, rhythmic beeping that seemed to pierce straight through my skull, each sound pulsing like a warning I could not yet understand. My eyes opened slowly, fighting against the weight pressing them down. All I saw at first was blinding white, a ceiling washed in fluorescent light, the kind of cold brightness that makes you forget what time of day it is. It took a few seconds before the blur sharpened into the outline of a hospital vent, then a metal pole, then the shadow of a nurse passing by. My body felt foreign, heavy, and wrong. My throat burned with every swallow as if something had scraped the inside raw. My neck ached a deep soreness that seemed to wrap all the way around. Even the act of breathing felt strained my airway tight in a way that sent ripples of panic through me. When I tried to lift my hand, the IV line tugged sharply and pain shot down my shoulder and across my ribs. I froze, breath hitching as a wave of dizziness crashed over me. A nurse rushed towards me, then her shoes squeaking softly against the floor. Her badge read Chloe. She pressed a button to raise the head of my bed and offered a careful smile that did not quite reach her eyes, as if she were trying not to show something she already knew. "You are at St. Jude Emergency," she said. "You were brought in by paramedics. You were unconscious when you arrived." Her voice was calm, but her eyes kept scanning my face like she was checking for something she was not allowed to tell me directly. I tried to form words, but the sound came out rough and broken. She handed me a small cup of ice chips and waited for me to try again. "Where is my family?" Chloe hesitated just long enough for me to notice. She glanced at another nurse who had paused at the curtain, then looked back at me. "They said they are still finishing Christmas dinner. With your brother." The sentence floated in the air like it belonged to someone else's life. Christmas dinner. With my brother. While I was here. On a hospital bed. With bruises I did not remember getting. I tried to sit up more, but the world spun instantly, tilting like a carousel, losing control. I gripped the bed rail, fighting to stay present, while Chloe steadied my shoulder. "Do not move too fast. You have a head injury, and your neck is swollen. We are monitoring your airway carefully. Swollen neck, head injury. None of it made sense. My mind scrambled to assemble the last thing I could remember, but every time I reached for something solid, it slipped away like smoke. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. A fall, an accident, something manageable, something that did not require the alternative I was terrified to consider. A doctor stepped in, then carrying a chart and radiology scans. He introduced himself as Dr. Moore and gently tilted my chin to one side. His touch was steady, but the pressure on my neck made me suck in a painful breath. "The bruising on your neck is bilateral," he said quietly, "and there is a pattern across your shoulder and upper back that does not match accidental trauma. This was not from a fall down the stairs." My pulse began to race, pounding so loudly in my ears that I almost missed the rest of what he said. "Someone grabbed you. Hard!" The statement cracked something open inside me. Images flashed in jagged fragments. A hand, heat against my face, the sound of a chair scraping violently, Christmas lights shimmering behind someone's shoulder, pressure around my throat, a ringing inside my head. I inhaled sharply, the memory slipping back into the dark just as fast as it surfaced. Dr. Moore wrote something on the chart. "We are required to notify law enforcement. An officer is already here." The curtain slid aside again and a uniformed officer stepped in. He introduced himself as Officer Reyes, his voice calm but serious, the tone of someone who did not ask unnecessary questions. He approached the side of my bed. "Your brother reported that you tripped in the dining room. Is that true?" The words hit me like a shove to the chest. I tried to search my memory for clarity, but every attempt felt like dragging my mind through mud. I wanted to answer. I wanted to say something that would make all of this make sense. But the moment I tried to speak, my throat tightened and fear coiled deep in my stomach. Officer Reyes waited. He did not press. He did not repeat the question. He simply watched, letting the silence between us carry the weight of everything I could not say. "You are safe here," he said softly. Safe. The word felt both comforting and impossible. If I was safe, why did my chest ache like someone had crushed it? Why did the memory of fingers digging into my skin flicker behind my eyes? Why was my family still at the dinner table with the one person who made my entire body tense with dread? Officer Reyes stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Someone fought you. You did not fall. And whoever it was, we will get to the bottom of it. But I need you to help me if you can." I opened my mouth, but before I could form a single word, the monitor beside me began to beep rapidly. Chloe adjusted something at my bedside while murmuring something I could not quite hear. The officer's voice broke through the haze one more time, sounding distant and distorted. "Why were you fighting for your life alone while your family stayed at the dinner table with the one who—" The unfinished question echoed in my mind as a flash of memory struck so hard it felt like a physical blow. My brother's face. Anger. A hand around my throat. A burst of pain. The world dimmed into darkness before I could hold on to the memory. When I woke the second time, the room felt dimmer, as if the lights had been lowered, or maybe my vision had simply adapted to the brightness. The beeping had steadied into a slower rhythm, but the heaviness in my skull remained. My throat felt tighter than before, and when I tried to swallow, the pain shot through my neck like a blade pressing inward. My body screamed in silent protest with every small movement. It was as if every nerve had been bruised from the inside out. Dr. Moore reappeared beside my bed, holding a tablet that displayed images I did not understand. He studied them for a moment before looking back at me. "I want to walk you through your injuries," he said. I nodded, even though the slightest tilt of my head made the room sway. He pointed to the screen. "These marks here on both sides of your neck are consistent with compression. The bruising pattern is symmetrical, which often means the pressure came from hands rather than a fall or object." My stomach twisted. I stared at the image of my own neck where dark patches spread in shapes I did not want to interpret. He swiped to another scan. "This is your shoulder and upper back. You have several fresh contusions, and they line up in a way that suggests you were pushed or forced against a hard surface." I tried to breathe deeply, but even that felt restricted. My airway felt narrower than it should, every breath rough and scratchy like I was pulling air past sandpaper. A nurse walked in to take my vitals. Her face shifted slightly when she wrapped the cuff around my arm and saw the faint discoloration along my bicep. She did not say anything about it, but her eyes did. She took my pulse, checked the oxygen monitor, adjusted the tubing at my nose, and pressed gently along the side of my neck. I winced, unable to stop the involuntary flinch. She looked at me then, not as a nurse performing routine care, but as a person quietly deciding how much truth I was ready to confront. "Do you feel pain when you breathe deeply?" she asked. "Yes." "Does it feel tight like something is pressing against your throat?" "Yes." "Does your shoulder hurt when you lift your arm?" I lifted it halfway before a bolt of pain shot down my side. She nodded. "That is muscular trauma from impact, not from falling." Her words lingered in the air as she finished the exam. When she left, I sat in the quiet hum of machines, trying to piece together what this meant. Falling did not explain the marks. Falling did not explain the bruises on both sides of my neck. Falling did not explain why I could not swallow without pain. My mind drifted back to the fragments. A table, a hand, a struggle. But every time I tried to connect them, they slipped away behind a wall of fear. I wanted to remember, but another part of me wanted to forget. Trauma does that. It buries pain under layers so thick you cannot tell what is real and what is imagined. Chloe returned with a chart. She checked the readings again before speaking. "We are required by state law to report any injuries suspected to be caused by another person. This is standard procedure." My fingers curled around the blanket. "I know," I whispered. She hesitated, then asked the question that made my breath falter. "Did someone in your family hurt you?" The words landed so heavily that I felt them physically. I swallowed again, but it burned. My vision blurred. I did not want to answer. I did not even know how to answer, because the truth was hiding in places my mind was refusing to open. Chloe continued in a softer tone. "We see cases like this more than you might think during the holidays. People feel pressure to pretend everything is fine. But your injuries tell a very different story." I looked at her, struggling to steady my voice. "I do not know what happened." She gave a small nod, one of understanding rather than disbelief. "That is common too. The brain protects itself. But your body remembers. Just like the officer said earlier. The curtain shifted slightly as she stepped aside for the radiology tech who arrived with more scans. He gently lifted my head to slide a support cushion beneath it. Even the small movement made me almost cry out. He apologized quietly. "You have swelling along the left side of your skull. The scan shows impact trauma. It is recent." The world felt like it was closing in around me. He continued adjusting the equipment, unaware of the storm building under my ribs. Impact trauma, compression bruising, swollen airway, shoulder contusions. None of these belonged to the story my family would tell. None matched the version where everything was fine and accidents happen and Emily trips sometimes. When the tech left the room, fell into a thick silence. I stared at the IV dripping slowly into my arm, the monitor tracing every anxious beat of my heart. Someone had grabbed me. Someone had pushed me. Someone had hurt me badly enough that I lost consciousness and was rushed to the ER. And the only people I had been with that night were the same ones still sitting at a Christmas dinner table eating peacefully beside my brother as if nothing had happened. Something inside me trembled, a slow shiver that crawled down my spine. I tried to replay the night to scrape memories from the edges of panic. The warm glow of the dining room, the tight grip on my arm, the pressure around my throat, the sound of Anna screaming, my father's voice telling me to stop ruining the evening. A rush of fear hit me so hard I felt dizzy again. I pressed my fingers into the blanket, grounding myself as my mind whispered the truth I could no longer push away. Falls do not leave fingerprints. Falls do not choke you. Falls do not erase entire minutes of your life. Someone had hurt me, and I was terrified. I already knew who. Officer Reyes returned about 20 minutes later, though it felt like seconds and hours at the same time. The door opened quietly and he stepped in with the measured calm of someone who had walked into countless rooms like mine. Rooms that smelled of antiseptic. Rooms where someone's life had cracked open. He pulled a chair closer to my bedside and sat down, not too near, not too far, just close enough that I could hear the soft rustle of his uniform. "Emily, I would like to ask you a few questions," he said. His tone was steady, careful, the kind that makes you feel observed, but not pressured. I nodded, though my hands trembled slightly under the blanket. He opened a small notebook. His first sentence was simple but heavy. "Holiday domestic violence calls increase every year. You are not the first case tonight." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. Not because he doubted me, but because he did not. He was already seeing something I had not allowed myself to face. "Tell me what you remember, even if it feels incomplete." I opened my mouth, but the words tangled before they could form. "I remember dinner," I whispered. "I remember the lights, the smell of cinnamon. My brother was in a good mood at first, then not. The rest blurred into a fog thick enough to choke on." My heart pounded harder. I cleared my throat. We were talking. I reached for something on the table. Then, I do not know. I felt this pressure. On my neck. His pen stilled slightly, but his face remained unreadable. Pressure from what? I swallowed and winced from the pain. It felt like hands. Both sides. Suddenly, I looked away, ashamed of how weak my voice sounded, even though none of this weakness was mine to carry. He nodded slowly. "Bilateral marks are rarely accidental." I closed my eyes, embarrassed by my own silence. I hated how afraid I sounded. I hated that I could not piece together the images in my head. Reyes leaned forward slightly. "Your brother told us that you tripped near the table, that you fell and hit your head on the corner. He said you had been drinking." I looked at him then fully, the shock moving through me like ice water. "That is not true. I was not drinking, not even a sip." He observed me for a moment, then made a note. I could feel something shifting, a small but undeniable pull in my chest. The beginning of anger, faint beneath the fear. "Tell me about your brother," he said. I hesitated, not because I did not know what to say, but because the truth was something I had swallowed for years. "He can get angry quickly," I said cautiously, "especially when he feels challenged or embarrassed." My pulse quickened. I felt my fingers curl around the blankets again. "He has always been intense, controlling sometimes. When he drinks, it gets worse." The officer waited. The silence pressed at me until I felt it push the next sentence out. "He and my parents. They have always sided with him. even when he hurt me before. The words sat between us heavier than I expected. It was the closest I had ever come to admitting the past out loud. Reyes did not react with surprise. Instead, he asked quietly, "Has he ever put his hands on you before?" A sharp, involuntary flinch went through me. The memory was old, blurred by distance, but not erased. I shook my head slowly, not meaning no, but meaning I could not bear to remember it fully. He made another note. "Trauma often hides details. Sometimes for years," he said. "But your body does not lie." I stared at the floor, tears gathering at the corners of my eyes. The officer let the moment breathe, then placed his notebook down. "I need you to listen closely," he said. "You do not have to remember everything today, but I need you to trust what your body is telling us. Your injuries are not consistent with a fall. Someone tried to overpower you. Someone tried to stop your breathing." The words landed in my chest with a weight that made my breath catch. I gripped the blanket harder, trying to steady myself as the truth crept into the spaces denial had been filling all night. He lowered his voice again. "If you cannot remember clearly, that is normal. But what matters is this. You survived something violent tonight, and the person who hurt you might still believe you will not speak." My throat tightened, not from injury this time, but from the quiet terror his words awakened. "Your body remembers even if your mind does not yet. And I am concerned for your safety if you return to the same environment." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. He did not look away. He did not apologize for speaking so directly. He simply said the one truth I had been avoiding since the moment I woke up. "Emily, someone in your family hurt you." I drew a shaky breath, the final walls inside me beginning to crack. "I think I already know who," I whispered. For as long as I can remember, our family of 4 never truly felt like 4. It felt like 3 plus me, an extra piece that never quite fit the puzzle. Growing up, I learned very early that there was a natural order inside our house, an unspoken hierarchy carved so deeply into the walls that even now, bruised and lying in a hospital bed, I could still feel its shape pressing against me. At the top was my father, a man whose voice carried more weight than anything else in our home. Right beneath him, shadowing him in both attitude and expectation, was my brother Daniel. My mother floated behind them somewhere soft and quiet, careful not to disturb their orbit. And then there was me orbiting alone, constantly reminded that I was second to everything and everyone else. Daniel had always been their perfect son. Or at least, he had been treated like one. When we were children, every achievement Daniel made was met with applause, praise, and sometimes even celebration. A B on a school project earned him pizza night. Scoring a goal in a game meant ice cream afterward. Even his smallest efforts were magnified into something extraordinary. With me, things were different. Perfect grades were expected, not celebrated. Whenever I accomplished something, it was acknowledged in the same tone someone might use to mention the weather. "Nice. Good. Put your shoes away." I never understood why my worth felt conditional. I just knew it was. The first cracks in the illusion formed when I was about 8. I had been playing in the living room when Daniel, already known for having a temper even as a child, threw one of my toys across the room. It shattered a decorative vase our mother loved. I froze at the sound. Daniel froze too, then immediately shouted, "Emily pushed me." I had been standing on the opposite side of the room. But when my father stormed in, the truth did not matter. All he saw was Daniel's trembling lip and my stunned silence. He glared at me with the disappointment of a parent who barely tolerates the child in front of him. "You need to be more careful," he said. "You know your brother is sensitive. Pick up the pieces." I remember kneeling on the carpet, small hands shaking as I gathered shards of porcelain, each piece, a reminder that my brother's lies weighed more than my truths. By the time we reached middle school, Daniel had grown more aggressive. The older he got, the stronger he became, and with that strength came entitlement. He shoved me in the hallway once when our parents were in the next room and later told them I had been annoying him. My father shrugged it off. "He is just being a boy. Toughen up." I learned then that any pain Daniel caused was either excusable or invisible. It was easier for them that way. They did not have to face the fact that their golden child had a darker side. They just had to make me carry the burden of it. But the moment that had never left me, the one that still haunted the edges of my memory, even now happened when I was a teenager. We were arguing about something trivial, something as meaningless as who got to use the bathroom first. I do not remember the words, only the sharpness of his voice. I turned to walk away, but he grabbed my arm and yanked hard. I lost my balance and tumbled down 3 steps of the staircase. I hit my shoulder and wrist on the way down. The pain radiated instantly. I cried out, clutching my wrist, feeling the heat and swelling spread fast. Daniel stood at the top landing expression blank, almost bored. When our parents rushed in, I thought for a moment that the truth might finally matter. But Daniel was faster. "She slipped," he said. "Dad, she slipped. You know how clumsy she is." I looked at my father, expecting him to see through the lie. Instead, he marched down the stairs, held out his hand, and pulled me up. "It was your fault for running in socks," he said, and that was that. I wore a brace for weeks, the pain a constant reminder not just of the fall, but of the fallacy that anyone in the house cared what really happened. Over time, the emotional bruises settled even deeper than the physical ones. Favoritism was woven into every corner of our lives. Daniel got the newest phone. I got his hand-me-downs. Daniel got extra money for school trips. I was told to appreciate whatever I was given. Daniel was defended. I was dismissed. Daniel was praised. I was tolerated. Even when my mother tried to show affection, it was brief and cautious, like she was afraid to upset the balance of the household. She would hug me in the kitchen when no one was looking, whispering things like, "I love you, honey," or "You are doing great." But the moment my father or Daniel walked in, her arms dropped, her expression reverted to neutrality, and I returned to invisibility. I grew up learning to read the room before speaking. I learned to swallow my thoughts, soften my presence, and make myself smaller so that Daniel's ego could take up all the space it wanted. The older we both became, the worse it got. Daniel's temper flared more often, especially when drinking became part of his routine. He was jealous, competitive, and accustomed to winning every conflict before it even began. Not because he earned it, but because our parents always ensured he did. And so, when I finally moved out on my own, I promised myself I would never return unless absolutely necessary. I built a life away from them, a life where I did not have to apologize simply for existing. A life where silence did not mean fear. When the holidays came around, I often made excuses to stay away. It was easier to be alone than to sit through another dinner where Daniel was celebrated and I was an afterthought. I told myself I was fine with the distance, but the truth was that a part of me still hoped things could change someday. That maybe my parents would see me. That maybe Daniel would treat me like a sibling instead of someone he was allowed to hurt without consequence. Yet the hierarchy never shifted. The house never evolved, and the emotional scars never faded. That was the environment I was raised in, a house full of decorations and holiday traditions and rules and silence, a place where Daniel was always protected, and I was always expected to endure. When I walked back into that home on Christmas Eve, I should have known the truth long before I ended up in a hospital bed. I should have known that nothing had changed, and maybe that is what hurts the most. I had promised myself years ago that I would never spend another Christmas under my parents' roof. The thought of returning to that house with its perfectly staged decorations and perfectly staged affection always left a cold weight in my stomach. Every holiday carried the same hollow rhythm, Daniel glowing in the center of attention, my parents orbiting him like planets around a sun, and me sitting quietly at the table, invited out of obligation rather than love. I had finally broken the cycle. I spent the last few Christmases with coworkers, friends, or even alone with a movie and takeout Chinese food. Anything felt warmer than the house I grew up in. But this year, my resolve cracked from the smallest, frailest voice. It happened 3 nights before Christmas Eve. I was in my apartment folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a FaceTime request. Seeing my niece's name on the screen made me smile instantly. Anna rarely called on her own. She was a sweet, gentle child, careful with her words, and often nervous when adults watched her too closely. When her face finally appeared on my screen, her big eyes were wide-rimmed in red, as if she had been crying. The Christmas tree lights behind her flickered in the background of my parents' living room. Aunt Em, she whispered. Her voice trembled. Can you come home this year? My heart sank. Anna, what is wrong? She glanced nervously over her shoulder as if someone might hear her even though she was in the far corner of the room. Her voice dropped even lower. Christmas is scary this year. I sat up straight, a cold nervousness prickling the back of my neck. Why is it scary? She shook her head, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her sweater. Daddy gets mad a lot, more than before. Mommy keeps saying I should not bother him. He and Grandpa yell more now, and Grandma cried yesterday. The words spilled out in soft, frightened pieces, each one landing with a weight heavier than she realized. I swallowed hard. Has he yelled at you? Her shoulders lifted. He squeezes my arm when he gets mad. Her voice cracked. He hurt a glass ornament last night. I blinked, confused. Hurt an ornament. Then the meaning hit me slowly with a sickening clarity. He smashed it. I asked gently, Did he scare you when he did that? She nodded so quickly her curls bounced. Please come home. I do not like Christmas this year. Please. That was all it took. Not guilt, not obligation, not the illusion that my parents might behave differently this time. Just one small child's fear. A fear I recognized all too well when I had carried for most of my life, but never had the courage to name until adulthood. I could not leave her alone with that feeling. I knew what it was like to be the child who flinched when a voice rose too quickly. I knew what it was like to watch parents look away instead of protecting you. And I knew how damaging it was to grow up believing your pain was an inconvenience, or worse, an exaggeration. I could not let Anna feel that way without trying to shield her, even if only for one night. I told her I would come. I will be there, sweetheart. I promise. Her face lit up in immediate relief, as if my presence alone would make Christmas safe again. I wished it were that simple. After ending the call, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at the wall, trying to ignore the creeping anxiety crawling up my spine. Going back meant walking straight into a place full of memories that still had their claws in me. It meant facing Daniel, who was unpredictable even on good days. It meant dealing with my father's disapproval and my mother's forced smiles. But it also meant being there for Anna. And maybe, just maybe, preventing another generation from absorbing the same patterns I once had. So on Christmas Eve, I packed a small overnight bag, wrapped a few gifts for Anna, and drove through the quiet, snowy streets toward the house I had avoided for years. I told myself it was just one night, one dinner, one attempt to protect the only person in that home who had ever made me feel wanted. I had no idea that within hours I would be fighting for my life. The moment I turned onto my parents' street, I felt a familiar tightness crawl up my spine. The neighborhood looked calm under its blanket of snow, each house glowing with warm Christmas lights and inflatable decorations that swayed gently in the cold air. From the outside, everything appeared festive and peaceful. But the closer I got to my childhood home, the more my stomach twisted. The house looked almost too perfect, like something pulled straight off a holiday card. Every window framed with garland. Every light bulb perfectly aligned. Even the wreath on the door hung as if measured with a ruler. That was the first sign. My mother's decorations were always meticulous, but this year it felt excessive manic, even as if she were trying to decorate over something. The second sign came the moment I stepped onto the porch. Before I could even knock, the deadbolt clicked loudly from the inside. It was not a casual unlocking. It was fast, sharp, as if someone had been waiting or watching for the exact second I arrived. My father opened the door with a wide smile that did not touch his eyes. "There you are," he said. A little late. The way he said it made my skin prickle. I stepped inside and another wave of unease hit me. The lighting was dimmer than usual, the living room lit mostly by the Christmas tree and a few scattered lamps. The shadows in the room felt heavier, clinging to the corners like something uninvited. That was the third sign. My mother hurried out from the kitchen with a folded dish towel in her hands, her smile stretched too tightly across her face. She hugged me quickly, pulling away just as fast. Her eyes darted toward the dining room as if checking whether someone was watching her. The fourth sign. I set my bag down near the coat rack and reached for my phone to silence it, but before I could tuck it away, my father gestured toward a woven basket on the entry table. "Phones go in there," he said. "No distractions during family dinner." He said it casually, but I felt the command beneath the words. My hand froze. My instinct screamed to keep the phone with me, but Anna came running from the hallway and hugged my waist tightly. I did not want to make a scene. I placed the phone in the basket. That was the fifth sign. As I walked further into the house, Daniel appeared from the dining room entrance. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with a look that made my ribcage tighten. Not anger, not annoyance, something colder, as if my presence disrupted a script he had already written for the night. That was the sixth sign. He did not greet me. He just smirked slightly as if daring me to speak first. My mother's voice wavered as she announced dinner was almost ready, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. I followed her toward the dining room, and the seventh sign hit me before I even crossed the threshold. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Normally, holidays at home were loud, filled with music my mother played to make the atmosphere feel cheerful. But tonight, there was nothing. No carols, no chatter, no clinking. Only the faint scrape of plates being set down. It was the kind of silence that does not belong in a home filled with Christmas decorations. The kind that belongs in a place holding its breath. That silence sat heavy in my chest as I took my seat. Anna slid into the chair next to mine, her tiny hand gripping my sleeve. When I looked down at her, she did not smile. Her eyes were wide, darting between her father and the table, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. That was the eighth sign. She leaned a little closer to me and whispered something so quietly I almost did not catch it. "Do not make him mad tonight." My breath caught in my throat. Daniel pulled out his chair across the table, dropping into it with a thud. My parents hovered around him, fussing the way people do for someone who holds power over the room. My mother poured him wine. My father carved his portion of ham first and slid it onto Daniel's plate. It was a small moment, but a familiar one. Daniel always ate first. Daniel always chose first. Daniel always mattered first. And even though I had seen this dynamic my entire life, something about it felt different that night. Sharper. More dangerous. My father finally sat at the head of the table, looking around with a forced smile. "Let us have a peaceful Christmas dinner," he said. His eyes lingered on me for a moment. The message was unmistakable. Do not disrupt this. Do not challenge him. Do not breathe wrong. Anna squeezed my sleeve again. Her small fingers trembled. I placed my hand gently over hers, trying to steady her, even though I was fighting my own rising dread. Every instinct in me whispered the same warning. Something was wrong. Something had been brewing long before I walked through the door. And every subtle sign in the house pointed to the truth I had tried to ignore. I was not just a visitor in a tense household. I had stepped directly into the middle of a storm that had been waiting for me. And Daniel was sitting at the center of it with a look that said he knew it. Dinner began the way a storm begins, not with thunder, but with an unnerving stillness. The kind of quiet that makes the hair on your arms rise because you can feel something gathering in the air. The dining room looked picture perfect, every plate aligned, every napkin folded into crisp triangles, candles flickering in the center like props on a set. But beneath the surface, something was fraying. My mother moved around the table with quick, nervous steps, adjusting the silverware, even though everything was already in place. My father sat with rigid posture, knife and fork held tight, his jaw ticking in a way I recognized all too well. And Daniel watched everything with a level of satisfaction that made my pulse kick up. He leaned back in his chair, smirking at intervals as if he were the only one enjoying the tension pressing against the room. "Dinner is served," my mother said in a voice that sounded too thin. She placed a platter of ham on the table. My father did not wait for anyone else. He immediately carved a thick slice and set it onto Daniel's plate, ignoring the rest of us. "Daniel, do you want more ham?" The way he asked it, the way he said Daniel's name, carried a tone I had heard my entire life. Deference, priority, worship disguised as parenting. Daniel shrugged, pretended to hesitate, then nodded. "Sure. Thanks, Dad." My father carved another slice for him before even glancing at anyone else. My mother reached for a serving spoon to dish potatoes onto my plate, but my father stopped her with a small gesture. Daniel should get his portion first. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it was enough to send a ripple of heat through my chest. My mother lowered her hand obediently, offering Daniel the bowl next. He barely looked at her, just scooped what he wanted and shoved the bowl toward Anna with a careless flick. She flinched but caught it with both hands, trying not to spill anything. I slid it away from her reach, placing it in a safer spot. Daniel noticed. His eyes sharpened, but he said nothing yet. Halfway through the meal, my father turned to me with the same dismissive tone he had used my entire childhood. "Your little job at the clinic keeping you busy." It was not a question. It was a jab disguised as polite conversation. I took a slow breath. "It is not little. It is full-time and important." He hummed without interest. "Daniel, how is work?" The shift was immediate, sudden, jarring. My father's face brightened and my mother's stiff shoulders relaxed just a fraction, as if a subject worth celebrating had finally been reached. Daniel launched into a story about his job, exaggerating every detail, painting himself as the center of every success. My parents listened as though he were delivering a keynote speech. They nodded. They laughed. They praised. I could have vanished from the room entirely and nothing would have changed. I picked at my food quietly, my attention drifting to the only other person in the house who felt the same way I did. Anna sat next to me, shoulders hunched, trying to make herself small. She held her fork awkwardly, her hand trembling slightly. When her elbow brushed the edge of her plate, her fork slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor. The room fell dead silent. Her eyes widened. She whispered barely loud enough for me to hear, "I am sorry." Before I could reach down to pick it up, Daniel grabbed her wrist under the table. His hand wrapped around it tightly, squeezing hard enough to make her breath hitch. She did not cry out, but her body recoiled so slightly it was almost invisible. Almost. My father did not look up. My mother did not react. Neither said a word. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. That was when something inside me snapped, not fully, but enough to ignite a spark of defiance. I leaned in just slightly and spoke in a low voice meant only for Daniel. "Let go of her." His grip tightened for a second, a deliberate reminder of who held the power in the room. Then he released her, leaning back slowly with a grin that did not reach his eyes. "Relax. I was just teaching her to be careful." Teaching! The word made my stomach turn. I placed my hand over Anna's trembling fingers beneath the table. Her skin felt cold, fragile. She stared at her plate, trying not to breathe too loudly. My father finally looked up, but not at Anna. Instead, he glared at me with irritation. "Do not meddle, Emily. You always make things bigger than they are." My mother nodded slightly, offering the smallest echo of his displeasure. The message was clear. Keep the peace. Do not challenge the golden boy. Do not embarrass the family. I tried to swallow the heat rising in my chest, but my throat felt tight, my heart thudding harder against my ribs. The candles flickered as if reacting to the tension swirling in the room. Daniel took a long drink of wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. There was something in his eyes that made me sit up straighter. A challenge, a warning, a promise. As the meal dragged on, every bite felt heavier, the air growing thicker by the minute. The silence between each fake laugh and forced smile grew louder, more threatening. This was not a dinner. It was a pressure cooker, one spark away from blowing open. I kept my hand on Anna's under the table, grounding her as much as myself. Daniel talked louder. My father laughed more abruptly. My mother's hands shook whenever she refilled their glasses. Something was building. I felt it. Anna felt it. And somewhere deep inside, so did Daniel. His smirk widened slightly as he caught my eye. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew no one at that table would dare stop him. Except me. The longer dinner dragged on, the more the tension shifted from something quietly simmering to something sharp enough to cut through the room. Daniel had already finished his second glass of wine, slamming it down on the table a little harder each time, as if daring anyone to comment. My father refilled it immediately, smiling with a strange mix of pride and fear. The kind of expression I had seen him wear countless times before, whenever Daniel began to slip toward that edge. My mother kept her gaze on her plate, taking shallow breaths while her hands shook each time she reached for a dish. She moved like someone walking through a minefield, afraid that even the smallest wrong step would trigger an explosion. Daniel leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms behind his head with exaggerated ease, pretending the room belonged to him. Maybe it did. It always had. He looked at me with that familiar mocking smirk, the one that grew wider each time he sensed weakness. So, he said, dragging out the words, "How is the independent life treating you?" The tone was casual, but the question dripped with something far more targeted. I swallowed carefully, feeling the soreness in my throat flare as I answered. "It is treating me just fine." He snorted softly. "I bet. Must be nice not having any real responsibilities." I stiffened. Before I could speak, my father chuckled and nodded in agreement. "Daniel has always worked harder than you. Some people just do." My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She did not look up, but her eyes flickered with a kind of pleading, as if begging me not to push back. My pulse quickened anyway. "I am responsible," I said. It was the truth, but the moment the words left my mouth, the atmosphere changed. Daniel lowered his arms, slowly leaning forward across the table. His expression darkened just enough to make my stomach twist. "Responsible," he repeated. "You. Responsible. That is a new one." My father let out a forced laugh that echoed too loudly in the unnatural quiet of the room. He nudged Daniel's shoulder lightly, a gesture that told him he was being funny even when he was not. I felt Anna press her knee against my leg under the table, a silent reminder to be careful. Her small hand reached for mine again, her fingers cold and trembling. I squeezed gently, both to comfort her and to steady myself. Daniel's stare sharpened. "I always wondered," he said, swirling the wine in his glass, "why you make everything so dramatic. You always have. You walk around acting like people are out to get you." My father nodded. "She does exaggerate. She always has." My mother opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. Her eyes dropped to her lap. I felt heat rising in my chest, burning through the thin restraint I had been clinging to since I arrived. I set down my fork, pushing my plate back slightly. "I do not exaggerate." Daniel laughed loudly, startling Anna so much she flinched. Then he leaned back in his chair again, but this time the smirk had vanished. Instead, his eyes glinted with something colder, more dangerous. He picked up his glass, took a slow drink, then set it back down with a thud that vibrated through the table. "You know what your problem is," he said quietly, almost conversationally. "You think you are better than this family. You left, and suddenly you think you are above everyone." My father stiffened, watching him with thinly veiled admiration. My mother stared at her napkin, twisting it into small knots. I kept my voice steady. "That is not what I think." Daniel tilted his head. "Sure it is. You walk in here like you are a guest in someone else's home. You barely help. You barely talk. It is always about how you feel, how hard your life is." He leaned forward. "But you forget something. You are not the victim here." The last word hit the table like a knife. I felt something inside me shift, something old and familiar, rooted in years of silence I had forced on myself. My throat tightened, not from fear, but from the rising pressure of truth fighting its way out. "I am not acting like a victim," I said. "I just will not let you treat Anna the way you treated me." My father slammed his knife down, making both my mother and Anna jump. "Enough," he barked. "Daniel is trying to have a calm conversation. Do not twist his words. Calm conversation." The words scraped at something deep in my chest. Daniel stared at me with a sudden stillness, like a hunter waiting for his target to take one wrong step. My mother whispered something barely audible. "Please, stop, both of you." It was helpless, brittle a plea with no real authority behind it. Daniel ignored her completely. He took another drink, eyes never leaving mine. "You always ruin holidays," he said. "You cannot stand it when things are not about you." My pulse slammed against my ribs. I could feel Anna gripping my arm tighter under the table, hiding her face from the rising tension. Daniel's voice dropped even lower. "Maybe if you learned how to behave, things would not go so wrong all the time." Something in my chest snapped, quietly, cleanly, like a small flame catching after sitting dormant for too long. I looked at him and said, "You do not get to hurt people just because you are unhappy." His expression changed instantly. The mask slipped, the amusement vanished, and something darker, rawer flickered behind his eyes. That was the moment the spark touched the fuse, and even though no one else at that table realized it yet, I felt the entire room shift with the weight of what was coming. The moment the words left my mouth, the room changed, not gradually, not subtly. It shifted in an instant like the air itself tightened and every molecule froze in expectation of something catastrophic. Daniel's expression hardened into something I recognized deep in my bones. That look, the one he used to give right before things turned dangerous when we were younger, the same look he gave the night he pulled my arm so hard I tumbled down the stairs, the same look that had haunted me for years but that I never allowed myself to fully name. My father glared at me with disgust as if I had committed a crime simply by speaking. His fist tightened around the handle of his knife until his knuckles turned pale. My mother covered her mouth quietly, eyes darting between us, already bracing for impact but too afraid to intervene. And Anna clung to my sleeve like she was holding on for dear life. Daniel leaned forward, both elbows pressing into the table, his voice dropping so low it felt like a growl. "What did you just say to me?" I swallowed, my throat aching from the bruising I still did not understand, but I kept my voice steady. "You heard me." His jaw clenched so tightly I heard the faint grinding of teeth. My father pointed his fork at me sharply. "Do not provoke him," he snapped. "Your brother is trying to talk to you like an adult." Adult was not the word for the way Daniel was staring at me now. His eyes were locked on mine with a heat that made my skin crawl. He pushed his chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor with a harsh screech that made Anna flinch. My heart pounded unevenly. A part of me screamed to back down, to apologize, to shrink the way I had been trained to do my whole life. But looking at Anna's terrified face changed everything. I could not do it. Not this time. Daniel stood shoulders tense, hands curling and uncurling as if he were fighting the urge to act. He took a step toward me, then another. "Emily," my mother whispered, voice trembling. "Stop, please, just stop." Daniel ignored her completely. "You think you can walk into this house after months of silence and lecture me," he said. His words rattled with anger he did not bother hiding. "You think you are better than me." It was not a question. It was an accusation, one built on years of resentment he had never voiced but always acted on. I stood slowly, making sure my chair did not bump into Anna. I positioned myself slightly in front of her instinctively. "I do not think I am better than anyone," I said, "but I will not sit here and let you scare her." Anna whimpered behind me, burying her face against the back of my arm. My father shot up from his seat, his voice booming across the room. "Emily, sit down. Right now. Do not make this worse. Make this worse." As if Daniel was not already vibrating with rage. As if speaking the truth was somehow more dangerous than the way Daniel's hands were already flexing like he was warming up before a strike. Daniel stepped closer, the smell of wine heavy on his breath. "You always think you can walk away from consequences," he said through clenched teeth. "But you cannot walk away this time. Not tonight." A bolt of cold fear shot through me. His voice, his posture, the way his fists twitched. Everything in me felt the familiar dread of a moment I had lived versions of in the past, but had never fully allowed myself to recognize as abuse. Daniel moved suddenly fast enough that my breath caught. He reached out and grabbed my arm just above the elbow, squeezing so hard my vision sparked. The pain was sharp and immediate, radiating up my shoulder. I gasped and tried to pull back, but his grip tightened further. "Emily, stop fighting!" My father barked as if I were the aggressor. My mother rose halfway out of her seat, frozen in place with her hands hovering in the air as if afraid to touch either of us. "Let her go," I said through clenched teeth. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Make me." The room tilted slightly from the pressure on my arm. I kept my feet steady, forcing myself not to show the fear burning in my throat. "You are hurting me." He leaned in closer, voice low and venomous. "That is the point." Anna sobbed softly behind me, her small body shaking. Something inside me snapped when I heard her. Without thinking, I yanked my arm backward as hard as I could, breaking free for a split second. But Daniel lunged forward, grabbing my other shoulder this time. His fingers dug deep into the muscle, twisting my skin painfully. My breath hitched. I pushed against him with my free hand, trying to create distance, but he shoved me back a step. My father shouted, "Sit down, Emily! You are causing a scene!" A scene! That was what they cared about. Not the grip bruising in my shoulder, not the fear in Anna's eyes, not the danger standing inches away from me, just the scene. Daniel moved faster than I could think. His hand shot upward and clamped around the side of my neck, not fully choking yet, but enough to send a jolt of panic through my body. The room blurred around the edges. My breath caught. The bruises on my throat pulsed with fresh pain. "Let me go," I rasped. "Let me go." Daniel's eyes were wild now, unrestrained. "No, you do not get to leave. Not tonight. Not again." His fingers tightened. My vision flickered. And just like that, the holiday dinner I had hoped would be peaceful turned into the moment I realized I might not survive the night. Daniel's grip tightened around my neck, not yet enough to cut off all air, but enough to send a bolt of terror straight through my chest. My hands shot up instinctively, grabbing at his wrist, trying to create space between his fingers and my throat, but he only squeezed harder. The pressure burned, radiating into my jaw and down my collarbone. My breath shattered into small, shallow gasps. I could hear my pulse hammering violently in my ears. Behind me, Anna screamed a shrill, terrified cry that sliced through the thick air like glass. My mother finally moved, rushing around the table, reaching out with both hands, but my father grabbed her arm and yanked her back. "Let them work it out," he snapped. His voice carried a finality that made my stomach lurch. "Work it out," as if I were not standing there with someone's hand clamped around my throat, as if this was an argument between children. As if this was normal. Daniel's face hovered inches from mine, twisted with a fury that looked almost triumphant. "You always think you can run," he hissed, "but not tonight." I clawed at his wrist, trying to wedge my fingers between his and my skin, but my strength was no match for his rage. My vision blurred around the edges. My knees weakened. I felt the world tilting slightly. He shoved me backward, slamming my shoulder into the wall. The impact sent a jolt of pain down my back and knocked the remaining air from my lungs. My head hit the molding with a crack that made stars explode behind my eyes. I choked out a gasp, my body folding slightly from the shock. Daniel took one more step toward me, his shadow swallowing mine. He grabbed the front of my sweater with both hands and yanked me forward before slamming me back against the wall again. The blow rattled my skull. I tasted something metallic in my mouth. Anna screamed louder, trying to run forward, but my mother pulled her into her arms, shielding her trembling body. My father remained at the table, watching with a coldness that chilled me even more than Daniel's grip. "Enough," I croaked. "Daniel, stop." He laughed, a short, humorless sound that vibrated against my cheek. "You do not get to tell me what to do. You never have, and you never will." His hand shot up again this time, grabbing the side of my neck and jaw. His thumb pressing painfully into the soft area beneath my ear. My airway tightened. The world dimmed a little more. I shoved at him with all my strength, but he barely budged. My fingers slipped along his arm, scraping against his skin, desperate for leverage. He shifted his grip again this time, pushing me sideways toward the edge of the dining table. The movement was so sudden I had no time to brace. My hip hit the corner hard. Pain shot down my leg. I stumbled, grasping for balance, but he grabbed my shoulder and drove me downward. My ribs collided with the edge of the table. A shock of pain tore through me, stealing what little breath I had left. I cried out involuntarily. Daniel's eyes lit with a sick, awful spark. "You see?" he said quietly, almost conversationally. "This is what happens when you do not listen." My hand shot out, gripping the table edge to keep from falling completely. My chest burned. My throat throbbed. Every breath sounded like it scraped against gravel. I tried again to pull away, but he grabbed my arm and spun me toward the ground. My knee buckled. I hit the hardwood floor hard, the impact bursting through my skull with blinding force. For a moment, I thought I had blacked out again. There was only ringing. A loud, violent ringing that swallowed every other sound. Through the ringing, I barely heard my mother whispering, "Daniel, please stop, please." She sounded more like she was begging him not to escalate rather than begging him not to hurt me. My father muttered something under his breath, something sharp and dismissive, but I could not make out the words. Daniel crouched beside me, his face close to mine, his breath hot against my cheek. "You always ruin everything," he growled. "Every holiday, every family moment. You make everything about you." His hand shot out again, grabbing the back of my sweater, hauling me upward. My vision swam. The room tilted sideways. I felt weightless for a second before he shoved me forward. My head struck the edge of a chair. A burst of white exploded behind my eyes. My limbs loosened. My thoughts scrambled out of reach. I collapsed onto the floor. I think I screamed, but the sound came out broken, muffled by the pounding inside my skull. Anna cried out again, a sound so filled with terror I felt it like a blade in my chest. She scrambled behind my mother, who clutched her while trembling uncontrollably. "Stop, please, stop," my mother whispered over and over, but she did not move toward me. She did not push him away. She did not shield me. She just pleaded from a distance, caught between fear and denial, paralyzed in the worst possible moment. Daniel stood over me, chest heaving, face flushed. He looked down at me like I was something he needed to remove from the room, something that had offended him simply by existing. My father finally spoke, his voice cold and clipped. "Emily, get up! Do not make this into a bigger issue." The words sliced deeper than any blow Daniel had delivered. Something inside me cracked, a part of me that had always hoped they would protect me, defend me, or at least see me. The world dimmed again, darker this time, the shadows pooling at the edges of my vision. Daniel reached down, grabbed my arm again, and yanked me upward, preparing for another blow. I did not have the strength to fight back anymore. But Anna did something none of us expected. She bolted. She tore herself from my mother's grasp and ran down the hallway as fast as her legs could carry her. Her footsteps pounded against the hardwood floor. She disappeared into the guest room, and 14 seconds later, faint but unmistakable, I heard her voice through the ringing in my ears. She had called 911. The world around me slipped into a strange, slow-motion haze, like someone had lowered a thick sheet of glass between me and reality. I was still conscious, but barely. Sounds echoed warped, stretching into indistinct tones that made it impossible to tell what was real and what was memory. My body lay twisted on the hardwood floor, the cold seeping through my clothes and into my bones. My head throbbed with a violent rhythmic pounding that matched the frantic beat of my heart. Every breath felt jagged, scraping through my bruised throat. I heard footsteps, soft at first, then sharper. Someone crouched beside me. I could not lift my head, but I sensed movement shadows shifting in my peripheral vision. My mother's voice came through the fog, quiet and shaking. "Emily, can you hear me?" Her hand hovered above my arm without touching me, trembling so hard I could hear the faint rustle of her sleeve. "Mom," I whispered, though the sound barely escaped my lips. My attempt to speak sent a fresh wave of pain through my throat. She flinched at the rasping sound like she could hear the damage in it. Then she leaned closer, her voice low, broken. "Emily, sweetie, please. Just stop arguing. Please." My father's voice cut through hers, sharp as a blade. "Do not coddle her. She always acts like she is injured worse than she is. Always exaggerating." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that I could not breathe properly, that my vision was flickering, that the room was tilting like an unstable carnival ride, but the words would not form. My mother's voice dropped even lower to a whisper not meant for me to hear. "If police come, we say she slipped." Daniel did not mean to. My mind jolted, a spark of clarity cutting through the fog. She slipped, just like when I was younger. just like every time Daniel had hurt me, as if he were incapable of wrongdoing, as if my pain was always an inconvenience that needed an explanation. Another voice echoed nearby. Daniel's, calm, cold, as if he were discussing weather instead of violence. She will think she fell. She always does. The sentence hit me with a force more crushing than his hands ever could. It was not guilt, it was certainty. Daniel believed wholeheartedly that no matter what he did, the story would bend in his favor. He had spent a lifetime learning that truth never mattered. Only the version my parents supported did. My father moved somewhere behind me, his footsteps heavy and purposeful. "Get her off the floor," he muttered. "She is making a mess of Christmas." I wanted to laugh, or cry, or scream at the insanity of the statement. I was sprawled on the ground with my head ringing and my throat bruised, and his concern was the appearance of the holiday. I tried to shift my body, but my limbs felt disconnected from my brain. My hands twitched weakly against the wood, grasping for something to anchor myself. A chair leg, the corner of the rug, anything. But everything slipped away as if the room itself was dissolving. The voices around me blurred into background noise. I could no longer distinguish who was speaking. I heard something crash, maybe a glass, maybe my own thought collapsing in on itself. Then everything faded again into a heavy silence. A different sound cut through the darkness, a small, frightened sob. "Anna. Emily, please wake up. Please." Her voice trembled with a desperation that sliced through my fog. I forced my eyes open for a moment. The room spun shapes merging into shadows. I saw her small form kneeling at the doorway, her hands clasped together as if praying. My mother pulled her back gently, whispering. Picturing them in that moment hurt more than the bruises. A child comforting herself while adults failed her completely. I blinked again and the world glitched like an old tape. Suddenly, I was somewhere else. Not the dining room, a different memory. I was younger, 15 maybe, standing on a staircase arguing with Daniel. I saw his face blurred at the edges, twisted with the same anger he wore tonight. I saw his hand reach for my arm. The memory snapped. Another image replaced it. The living room, a Christmas tree. I heard a crash. Felt my wrist twist. I tasted the metallic flavor of pain just like now. Then darkness. The fragmented memories overlapped with the present, merging into a collage of moments I had tried to bury. My brain was stitching together the pieces it had stored in hidden corners. I remembered the pressure on my neck tonight, the sudden burst of stars when he hit my head, the sound of my mother's voice shaking as she begged him to stop, the way my father dismissed it all with a single glare, the warmth of blood rushing through my head as my legs buckled, and the look on Daniel's face. Not guilt, not regret. Satisfaction. The kind of satisfaction that came from finally proving a point he had wanted to make for years. "You do not get to leave. Not tonight." The phrase repeated in my mind like a haunting chant. Another memory surfaced without warning. I was small, maybe 8, crying in the hallway. My father scolding me, telling me to lower my voice. Daniel's handprint on my shoulder. My mother saying softly, "Just let it go, honey. It is easier that way." Easier for who? Not for me. Never for me. The pieces swirled, forming something undeniable. This was not an isolated moment. This was a pattern, a history, a cycle that had started long before I ever understood what violence looked like. The fragments blurred again, the edges of consciousness pulling at me. Voices dimmed. The ringing returned, and just before everything went silent, I heard the faint sound of distant sirens approaching. When consciousness dragged me back again, it did not feel gentle or healing. It felt like being pulled from the bottom of a frozen lake, lungs burning, skin-numb vision blurred by cold fluorescent lights. The ceiling above me flickered slightly, its harsh glow forcing my eyes to squint. For a moment, I did not know where I was, only that every inch of my body throbbed with a deep, punishing ache. Then the beeping returned steady and relentless, sinking with the trembling in my chest. A nurse leaned over me, her face soft but shadowed with concern. She spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word needed to land without shattering me further. "You are at St. Luke's emergency department. You were brought in by paramedics. Do you remember anything?" I tried to answer, but the moment I opened my mouth, a raw sting flared across my throat. She touched my wrist gently, grounding me. "Do not force it. Just nod if you can hear me." I nodded, though the motion sent a sharp jolt of pain through the base of my skull. The nurse glanced at the monitor, then reached for a chart clipped to the foot of the bed. "We had to place you on oxygen because your breathing was shallow when you arrived. There are marks on your neck and some swelling around your airway." She paused before adding, "And you have signs of concussion." Her tone shifted slightly, becoming even more deliberate. "The doctor will explain more when he comes back." My hand twitched weakly against the blanket. I tried to lift it, but my arm felt like it weighed 50 pounds. When I managed to raise it a few inches, the IV tugged at my skin, reminding me I was tethered to more than one machine. Someone moved behind her, and a moment later Dr. Patel stepped into view. His expression was focused, the kind of focus that comes from experience with cases that go beyond simple injuries. "Emily," he said gently, "I need to ask you a few questions. I will keep it brief." I swallowed, wincing at the pain. He held up a small penlight and shined it into each of my eyes. My vision pulsed at the center, a dark spot growing and shrinking like a heartbeat. "You have a concussion," he confirmed. "We are running additional imaging to check for internal bleeding." He lowered the light and exhaled slowly, like he was deciding how to phrase the next part. "You also have bruising on your upper arms, shoulders, and back. And there are distinct marks around your neck." His eyes lifted to mine, steady and unflinching. "These injuries are not consistent with falling down stairs." My pulse spiked so suddenly the monitor sped up with it. I tried to focus on the doctor's words, but my mind kept flickering between fragments of the dining room, the pressure on my throat, the lights blurring into streaks as I lost consciousness. It felt unreal, like a nightmare trying to disguise itself as memory. Dr. Patel stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You were showing signs of strangulation when you arrived. That is extremely serious. Even brief pressure on the neck can cause delayed complications." The nurse adjusted my oxygen cannula, her movements careful, her eyes avoiding the bruises on my skin. Dr. Patel continued, giving me no room to hide from the truth. "In emergency medicine, strangulation is one of the strongest predictors of future lethal violence. It is something we must take seriously." I felt my chest tighten, not just from the physical pain, but from the weight of his words. My mind drifted back to the moment Daniel's hands closed around my throat, the sound of my breath disappearing, the panic rushing through me like fire, the helplessness. The nurse placed a hand on the rail of my bed, her voice soft but firm. "Emily, we are required by state law to report injuries suspected to be caused by domestic violence. The police have already been notified. They will come speak with you soon." My stomach twisted so violently, it felt like the room lurched sideways. Police. I was not ready. I did not even fully remember what happened. Or maybe I did, and I just did not want to accept it yet. The nurse seemed to read the panic rising in my expression. "You are safe here. No one can reach you. You are protected." The word safe reverberated through me, but it felt foreign, like a language I had forgotten long ago. Safe was not something I associated with Christmas Eve. Safe was not something I associated with home. Dr. Patel shifted, flipping through my imaging results. "Your scans show no skull fracture, but you do have significant swelling along the side of your head. The impact was strong." He lifted a photo clipped to the chart. My stomach dropped when I realized it was a close-up of my own neck. A jagged pattern of red and deep purple bruises wrapped around my throat like a necklace made by violence. My breath caught at the sight. The doctor must have seen my reaction. His voice softened. "These marks are highly indicative of compression by hands. People do not bruise in this pattern from a fall." My mind froze. Then a smaller, sharper memory surfaced, a faint scar on my wrist, something I had explained for years as an accident. He pointed at it now. "This mark here, it looks old. Did you injure yourself in a similar way before?" I blinked, stunned. My throat tightened. I had fallen. Had I? Or had I been pushed back then, too? Had I told the truth or the version my family fed me? My mind reeled. The doctor continued gently. Patterns repeat, Emily. The body remembers even when the mind tries to forget. A deep trembling spread through my chest as if the truth was pushing its way to the surface whether I invited it or not. A knock sounded on the curtain. A voice followed. Officer Ramsey, Denver Police Department, requesting permission to enter. My heartbeat roared in my ears. The nurse looked at me with calm reassurance. You do not have to answer anything you are not ready to, but he is here to help you. The curtain slid open and a tall officer with steady eyes stepped inside. He scanned my injuries instantly, and something in his jaw tightened. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. Emily, I need to ask what happened tonight. I heard my pulse thudding against the blood pressure cuff on my arm. The room felt too bright, too loud, too full of memories I did not want. The officer kept his voice steady. Your brother told paramedics you tripped, that you were emotional, that you lost balance. My stomach twisted again. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. She slipped. She always slips. Officer Ramsey continued. But based on your injuries and the medical examination, that explanation is unlikely. He took a small step closer, lowering his voice. Emily, were you harmed by someone in your family tonight? My lips parted. No sound came out. My throat burned. My vision blurred again at the edges. He did not rush me. He waited in stillness, giving me the space my own family never had. And while I could not speak yet, my body answered for me. Tears slipped down my temple, quiet but undeniable. Officer Ramsey did not push me to speak. He simply stood there, quiet and steady, giving me time to breathe through the raw ache in my throat and the swirl of panic that made my fingers tremble against the hospital blanket. The room hummed softly with machine rhythms, each beep reminding me that my body was still here, still alive, even if my mind felt split between the present and 1,000 unbearable memories. When I finally managed a shallow inhale, the officer nodded slightly, as if acknowledging that tiny act of survival. Emily, he said, I want you to know something before we go any further. Injuries like yours are not accidental. This is coming from experience. Someone hurt you. His words were not accusatory. They were protective grounding, pulling me back from the edge of silence. I swallowed, wincing as the bruised tissue in my throat flared. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked into nothing. He lifted a hand gently. You do not have to talk yet. I will gather what I can. The nurse stepped forward. Officer, we also have the preliminary forensic notes from intake. He nodded. Let's start there. Dr. Patel returned with a folder standing at the foot of the bed. His voice was calm, but unmistakably firm. The pattern of bruising on her neck shows clear lateral compression. There are contusions on both sides consistent with manual pressure. The officer's jaw clenched slightly, and the marks on her arms. Dr. Patel nodded, flipping to another page. Thumbprint-shaped bruises along the upper arms and forearms. Distinct finger patterning. The officer wrote something down quickly. And the head injury. Dr. Patel continued. Impact against a hard surface. Corner height suggests a table edge or similar furniture. I felt my stomach twist, remembering the jolt of pain when my body slammed into the dining table, remembering the blur of lights, the sound of my own choked breaths. Officer Ramsey looked back at me, his expression tightening with something between anger and protectiveness. The story your brother gave does not line up, not even remotely. Before I could respond, a different voice echoed from the doorway. Officer, we got the neighbor's footage. Both men turned. Another officer stepped inside, slightly out of breath. The camera picked up audio, too. Ramsey's eyes sharpened. Play it. The second officer opened a small device, tapping the screen. A faint crackle came from the tiny speaker. I heard wind, the faint sound of a car door. Then the unmistakable noise of footsteps approaching a house. Ramsey leaned in, eyes narrowing. Increase the volume. The audio grew clearer. A male voice shouting. Not words, just raw anger echoing from somewhere inside a home. A heavy thud followed, then a gasp mine. I felt myself shaking before I realized it. The officer glanced at me not with pity, but with validation. That is you correct. I nodded weakly. The nurse placed a supportive hand on my forearm. Another sound came through the recording, a higher-pitched voice. Anna. Her terrified scream cut through the room like a blade. No, no, stop, please, stop. My heart crumpled inside my chest. The officer's expression hardened into something unmistakable. A child witnessed this. That changes everything, Ramsey asked. You said there were visuals. The second officer nodded and opened a short video clip. The image was grainy, recorded from a porch camera across the street, but clear enough to show shapes moving through the front window. At first, just shadows. Then a figure, Daniel, dragging me by the arm through the entryway. My head dipped forward limp as he jerked me inside. My knees buckled in the video. He did not slow. Ramsey exhaled sharply. That is assault, clear as day. The second officer shook his head. And there is more. This came from a tablet they found on the dining table during scene check. It was recording audio the entire time the child was playing with it. He pressed play. The recording began with the gentle sound of silverware against plates. My mother's voice murmured something soft. Then Daniel. His tone, mocking, simmering. The audio spiked, a chair scraping violently, my voice cracking, the unmistakable sound of my breath being cut off, a struggle, a heavy impact, the table rattling, my mother's frightened whisper. If the police come, we say she slipped. Daniel's cold response followed. She will think she fell. She always does. The blood drained from my face. Hearing it played back was worse than remembering it. It was confirmation, evidence, proof of a truth I had lived with for years but had never been able to name out loud. Officer Ramsey snapped the device shut and straightened. This is no longer a simple domestic call. This is felony-level assault, strangulation, child endangerment. His voice grew sharper. And now attempted witness manipulation. He turned, slightly addressing the second officer. Secure all copies of that recording. Make sure it is backed up twice. Send the file directly to the prosecutor on call. I blinked, stunned by the speed at which everything was unraveling. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's life explode. Ramsey faced me again. Emily, do you know what the #1 predictor of homicide is in domestic violence cases? I could not speak, but the dread in my chest pulsed through every inch of me. Strangulation, he said quietly. Even one episode increases risk dramatically. You surviving long enough for your niece to call for help is not something I take lightly. His eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. I want to be absolutely clear. You did nothing wrong. This is not your fault. The words shook something loose inside me. Guilt I had been carrying since childhood cracked at the edges. The nurse cleared her throat gently. Officers, the child. Has she been found? The second officer nodded. She is with CPS right now. She told them what she saw. Her statement matches the audio, matches the injuries, matches everything. My chest tightened. Relief, fear, grief, all at once. My mother's voice from that night echoed in my head. Daniel did not mean to, but now the evidence had overridden decades of denial. The officer tucked the notebook into his jacket. Emily, we have enough to move forward even if you are not ready to speak, but I want to give you a chance to confirm something if you can. His eyes held mine gently. Did your brother put his hands around your neck? The room was silent. Machines hummed. Air hissed through the oxygen line. My body remembered before my voice did. My hand lifted slowly, trembling, reaching for my throat. I touched the bruises, feeling the raised ridges beneath my fingertips. That was my answer. The officer nodded, not pressing me for more. Thank you, he said softly. That is enough. You are safe now. For the first time in my life, those words felt like they might be true. The hours that followed blurred into a long stretch of cold light and quiet panic, broken only by the steady rhythm of machines keeping track of my pulse, my breathing, and the fragments of strength returning to my body. I drifted in and out of a strange, half-conscious state, hearing pieces of conversations, footsteps, and the distant hum of the hospital. But when the curtain at the foot of my bed slid open again, the air shifted. My mother stood there gripping the edge of the curtain with white knuckles, her face pale and eyes red from crying. Behind her was my father, stiff-backed, jaw tight, wearing the same stone-faced expression I had seen all my life whenever something threatened the family image he worshipped more than anything else. They entered without waiting for permission. The nurse at the station called after them, but my father brushed her off with a dismissive gesture. He stopped beside my bed, towering over me with a glare that carried more anger than concern. "Emily," he said, his voice low and cold, "what have you told them?" My mother hovered behind him like a shadow, wringing her hands, unable to meet my eyes. A lump tightened in my throat, the bruises under my skin pulsing painfully each time I breathed. Before I could answer, my father leaned closer. "This has gone far enough. You need to fix what you started." "Fix." The word hit me like ice water. His expression hardened further. "The police have the wrong idea," he said sharply. "They think Daniel hurt you." His tone dripped accusation, as if the very idea was absurd, as if the evidence, the bruises, the recordings, the terror etched into my bones were nothing more than inconvenient misunderstandings. I tried to speak, but a sharp stab of pain shot through my throat, silencing me. My mother whispered my name softly, finally looking at me for the first time since she walked in. Her eyes glistened with fear. Not fear for me, fear of what would happen to Daniel. Fear of what would happen to their perfect holiday image if the truth came out. "Emily," she murmured, her voice cracking. "Please, tell them it was an accident. You slipped. Just say you slipped." The same line she had used for 20 years. The same story they had shoved into my mouth every time Daniel's temper left bruises on my skin, or fear buried in my chest. My pulse spiked, the monitor beeping faster. My father snapped at her. "Do not coddle her. She needs to tell the truth. His version." He raised a finger and pointed it at me like a weapon. "You will tell the police that nothing happened. You will tell them Daniel did not touch you." His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "You will not destroy this family." Something inside me recoiled, something old and tired and worn from years of carrying guilt that did not belong to me. I opened my mouth to speak, but before any sound came out, the curtain pulled back again. Officer Ramsey stepped inside with another officer at his side. Both men froze briefly at the sight of my parents looming over me. My father straightened immediately, attempting to regain control. "Officer, good. I'm glad you're here. My daughter has something she needs to clarify." Ramsey raised a hand, calmly cutting him off. "Mr. Collins, we need to speak with your daughter alone." My father stiffened. "That won't be necessary." "It is necessary, sir." His tone left no room for negotiation. My father's jaw clenched. He turned toward me, eyes sharp with warning. "Emily, remember what we talked about." My mother whispered urgently, "Please, sweetheart, do not make this worse." The second officer stepped closer. "Sir, ma'am, you need to leave. Now." My father drew in a breath, ready to argue, but one look at Ramsey's expression stopped him. He grabbed my mother's wrist, pulling her toward the exit. She glanced back, once her eyes full of silent pleading, then followed him out. The curtain fell shut behind them, muffling their voices. Ramsey exhaled quietly before turning to me. "Are you all right?" I nodded slightly, though the motion sent another jolt of pain through my skull. The second officer crossed his arms. "They were trying to pressure you into changing your statement." My pulse quickened again. Ramsey shook his head with a mixture of disappointment and frustration. "That is witness intimidation, and it will be documented." The room felt suddenly heavier, not frightening, just real. Real in a way my family had never allowed things to be. Ramsey softened his voice. "Emily, we interviewed your parents separately. Their stories about what happened tonight do not match." My breath caught. He continued. "Your father claims you were acting emotional and unstable, that you were the one who provoked Daniel." The second officer added, "Your mother tried to say it was a misunderstanding, but she contradicted herself 3 different times." Ramsey lowered his voice. "And Daniel—" His jaw tightened slightly. He changed his story twice before he even sat down. He first claimed you tripped, then he said you fainted, then he said you bumped into a wall. Nothing aligned with the evidence. I felt something inside my chest crack open. Maybe grief, maybe relief, maybe both. The second officer placed a folder on the small tray table beside my bed. Inside were printed images from the neighbor's video, blurry outlines, but unmistakable. Daniel gripping my arm, my body collapsing, him dragging me inside, and beside it a transcript from the tablet recording. Seeing the words written out on paper made my stomach twist violently. She will think she fell. She always does. Ramsey watched my reaction carefully, giving me space to breathe through the shock. "Emily," he said gently, "we know what happened. You do not have to protect them anymore." My eyes stung, not from the pain, from the truth I had never allowed myself to see clearly. My mother's silence, my father's excuses, their devotion to Daniel above all else, their willingness to rewrite reality to protect him. It all shattered in an instant, falling away until only one fact remained. They never protected me. They never believed me. And they never would. The curtain opened again, and this time a woman stepped in. She wore a CPS badge and carried a clipboard. Her presence radiated professionalism and quiet authority. "Ms. Collins, I am here about your niece Anna." My chest tightened. "Where is she?" The woman smiled gently. "She is safe. She told us everything she saw. She was very brave." Relief washed through me so powerfully I felt tears spill down my cheeks. The CPS worker continued. "Her statement supports the evidence. She expressed fear of returning home with her father." My breath hitched. Ramsey exchanged a glance with the CPS worker. "Given the circumstances, she said we will be placing her in protective custody pending further evaluation." My heart ached for her, but it was a necessary ache, one that came from the first real act of safety in her life. The CPS worker stepped closer. "Emily," she said softly, "your niece asked me to tell you something." I blinked through the tears. "What did she say?" "She said, 'Please tell Aunt Emily she is not alone anymore.'" The words broke something open inside me, but not in a painful way, in a freeing way, in a way that told me the cycle was finally cracking. Ramsey straightened. "Emily, your brother will be arrested tonight, and your parents will be questioned again." His voice carried finality, gravity, justice. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle into the deepest places inside me. My family was not collapsing. It had collapsed long ago. Tonight only exposed the ruins that had always been there. The next phase unfolded faster than my mind could process, as if the hospital room had become a command center where decisions carried the weight of life and death. Officer Ramsey remained beside my bed while the second officer stepped out to make calls, and the CPS worker waited near the doorway, speaking softly into her phone about Anna's temporary placement. The quiet urgency in the room felt heavy, but for the first time it was not directed at silencing me or reshaping the truth. It was focused on protecting me. That alone felt unreal. Ramsey adjusted his stance slightly, his expression sharpening with professional resolve. "Emily, I need to ask a critical question, and I need you to be honest. Does your family have firearms in the house?" My stomach tightened. Images flashed in my mind, the locked cabinet in the hallway closet, the safe code only my father and Daniel knew, the hunting rifle Daniel used on weekends, the handgun my father kept for emergencies. I managed a small nod. My throat burned, but I forced the words out in a hoarse whisper. "Yes." Ramsey's jaw flexed. "How many?" I closed my eyes, counting them as best I could through the fog. 2 rifles, 1 handgun. He pressed gently. "And are they all stored together?" I nodded again. "With Daniel's history of violence," he said, "and given what happened tonight, we cannot take chances. Colorado protocol requires us to initiate an emergency firearm removal when domestic violence involving strangulation is suspected." The room seemed to grow colder. The reality of what he was saying hit me in waves. They are going to seize the guns. For a moment, I imagined my father's reaction, his outrage, his certainty that he was being wronged, his belief that the world should bend before his version of events. Ramsey must have sensed my spiraling thoughts. "This is not about punishing them," he said. "This is about keeping you alive." My breath caught in my chest. He continued, voice steady. "Your brother has already shown he is capable of escalating. Strangulation is a major red flag. Access to firearms increases the danger exponentially." The nurse stepped closer, checking the IV line with hands that were calm despite everything unfolding around us. She offered a small, reassuring nod as if reminding me I was no longer trapped in a house where my pain was ignored. The second officer returned, holding a clipboard. "Warrant is in motion," he said. "Judge signed off within 10 minutes. Team is already on the way to secure the weapons." Ramsey looked back at me. "Emily, you are being placed under a temporary 72-hour protective order. It means your family cannot contact you, visit you, or come near this hospital." My heart stuttered. My parents, Daniel, none of them could come near me. For the first time in my life, the distance felt like air in my lungs instead of isolation. I whispered, "Thank you," though the words scratched like sandpaper through my bruised throat. The officer shook his head softly. "This is standard procedure, and it is the safest step. We will review everything again after 72 hours, and the order can be extended to a long-term protective order if necessary." Necessary. The word echoed through me heavy with truth. This was not temporary conflict. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a pattern of danger that had almost killed me. The nurse leaned closer, placing a cool hand on my forearm. "You are protected now. No one can walk through that door without our clearance." Her calm confidence steadied something inside me. The CPS worker approached the bed next. Her expression softened with compassion. "Emily," she said, "I want you to hear this clearly. Anna is somewhere safe. She will not be returned to that home tonight. That home." The phrase cut deeply. It was never a home. Not for me, maybe never for her either. The CPS worker added, "Her safety is our priority, and so is yours." I felt tears gather at the edges of my vision. My voice trembled even in silence. Ramsey spoke again, grounding the moment with practical clarity. "Your parents will learn about the firearm seizure when our team arrives. They may react strongly. You do not need to witness that." His gaze met mine with quiet certainty. "You are not responsible for their choices or their consequences." His voice softened, but his words remained steady. "Tonight, your survival came first. It will continue to come first." My pulse eased slightly, as if my body finally believed I was not in immediate danger. The officer stepped back to leave, giving me space to breathe. The CPS worker nodded once more, then slipped out to coordinate further. The nurse adjusted the blanket over me gently and whispered, "You are not alone anymore." For the first time in years, I let myself believe it. The 72 hours that followed felt like living inside a suspended world where time moved strangely and everything familiar had been stripped away. The hospital room became the only space untouched by my family's control, the only place where the truth was allowed to exist without being twisted. Nurses checked on me regularly, speaking in soft, grounding tones. Officers came by to update me. Therapists rotated through with gentle questions meant to help me steady my mind after the trauma. But even in that protected environment, fear and disbelief clung to me like a second skin. On the third morning, just as the early sun melted into the blinds, Ramsey returned with another stack of papers and a look that told me things had escalated again. He nodded a greeting before pulling up a chair. "Emily, we need to go over a few developments." My heart tightened. He continued. "Daniel was taken into custody the night of the incident. He was combative at the scene, which did not help him." He paused before adding, "And your father attempted to interfere with the firearm seizure." My breath caught. "What happened?" "He shoved an officer," Ramsey said bluntly. "Claimed we had no right to enter the home. Once he was shown the judge's order, he backed down, but he made it clear he believed the law did not apply to him." That sounded exactly like him, familiar in a sickening way. Ramsey opened the folder in his hands. "We have collected quite a bit of digital evidence. One thing you need to know is that your brother has been sending emails. To me." My pulse stumbled. "Emails? When?" "Early this morning." The officer's expression darkened. They were not friendly. He quoted one. "She knows what she did. She will ruin us all." She needs to stop lying. My stomach twisted violently. Ramsey continued. He also sent one to you. Before I could respond, he held up a printed email. It was long, frantic, and full of accusations that made no sense. He called me unstable, called me manipulative, said I had embarrassed him for the last time. He ended it with a sentence that sent cold shock through my veins. If you keep pushing this, I will have no choice but to make sure you stay quiet. The words pulsed at the edge of my vision like a threat carved into stone. The officer lowered the page. That statement alone qualifies as witness intimidation. The prosecutor is adding it to the charges. I struggled to breathe evenly, not from physical injury, but from the realization that even after being arrested, Daniel's instinct was still to threaten me, to silence me, to cling to the dominance he had been raised with. Ramsey leaned forward. Emily, you are not safe communicating with him. Do not answer anything he sends. Do not acknowledge it. Everything goes directly to us. My throat tightened again, but this time it was from the small flicker of protection I felt, a contrast to the years when no one ever stepped between me and him. The officer pulled out another document. This is the paperwork requesting a long-term protection order. The judge will review it today. Given the evidence, it is almost guaranteed to be approved. I took the pen he offered with a trembling hand and signed where he indicated. The moment my name touched the paper, something inside me shifted. For the first time, there was a line between me and them, a boundary, a consequence. Not long after Ramsey left, a therapist named Dr. Jennings entered quietly. She was in her 40s with a calm presence that felt like the closest thing to safety my body recognized. She pulled up a chair and sat beside me, notepad resting on her lap. Emily, I know you have been through significant trauma. We need to talk about the nightmares you mentioned. I swallowed, my throat aching. They are not just nightmares. They feel like memories. She nodded slowly. That happens when the body finally recognizes danger it once had to ignore. Memories surface when they feel safe enough to be seen. I closed my eyes, images flashing. Daniel's hand grabbing my wrist when I was 11. Him pushing me into a wall when I was 12. My father telling me to stop overreacting. My mother crying quietly but never stepping in. Dr. Jennings scribbled something softly. What you are describing is consistent with long-term exposure to family-based trauma. It does not surprise me that the event the other night triggered older memories. Trauma tends to loop until it is processed. Her words did not feel judgmental or heavy. They felt like truth settling into place. A truth I had needed anyone to name for years. She continued gently. You have lived in survival mode for most of your life. That changes how the brain stores memories, how it reacts to conflict, how it perceives safety. I opened my eyes, realizing I had been gripping the blanket tightly. She softened her voice even further. None of this is your fault. Every reaction you had is a normal response to abnormal circumstances. Her words unraveled something inside me that had been knotted for decades. Later that afternoon, the prosecutor assigned to the case, Ms. Langford, arrived. She was decisive, sharp, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen countless cases like mine, but never became numb to them. Emily, she said, pulling a chair close, we are moving swiftly. The evidence is strong. The audio, the video, the medical findings, the inconsistencies in their statements. I have enough to take this to trial with confidence. My pulse quickened nervously. She studied me for a moment, her eyes steady. Are you prepared to testify if needed? I hesitated. The idea of facing Daniel in a courtroom made my chest tighten painfully. My voice cracked. Do I have to? She shook her head gently. Not unless absolutely necessary. The digital evidence alone may be enough. But I want you to feel empowered, not pressured. I nodded slowly, though fear still flickered in my chest. Ms. Langford opened another folder. One more thing. She placed a printed screenshot on the tray table. It was the search history from Daniel's phone. My breath caught when I read the first line. How long until someone dies from strangulation? The prosecutor's voice darkened. This alone is enough to show intent. The words felt like ice water pouring down my spine. Everything he did, everything I survived, none of it had been impulsive. He had thought about it, considered it, searched for it. Ms. Langford gathered her documents. The pretrial process is beginning. There will be no contact allowed, no negotiation, no plea without our approval. You are no longer alone in this. Her certainty steadied me. For the first time, the path ahead did not feel like a battlefield I had to cross by myself. It felt like a road with people standing beside me. The courthouse felt nothing like the hospital. The hospital had been sterile and bright, but it held a fragile sense of safety, a thin barrier between me and the people who had nearly destroyed me. The courthouse, by contrast, felt heavy, every hallway echoing with footsteps and whispers that made my skin crawl. The air itself seemed to hum with tension, full of stories like mine cases that had unraveled behind closed doors for years. When Ms. Langford guided me through security, I noticed how my hands trembled, even though I tried to hide it. "You do not need to testify today," she reminded me quietly as we walked. "This is the pre-trial hearing, but you should be here. It helps you understand what we are dealing with." I nodded, grateful for her steady presence, though the knot in my stomach tightened with every step. As we approached the courtroom, voices spilled into the hallway. I recognized one instantly. My father. His tone was sharp, defensive, filled with the same authoritative certainty he wielded at home. "The judge is overreaching. This is a family matter. It should not be criminal." A second voice joined his calmer but dripping with superiority. "Daniel's attorney. We will argue this was a misunderstanding. Without her testimony, there is no proof of intent." Ms. Langford let out a slow breath. "They are rattled," she murmured. "Good." The bailiff opened the door, and the moment we stepped inside, the world shrank into a single, suffocating space. The room was filled with people, but my eyes went straight to the defendant's table. Daniel sat there in a crisp, button-down shirt, hair neatly combed, posture perfectly straight. Nothing about him resembled the man who pinned me against the wall on Christmas Eve, who squeezed the air from my lungs until stars burst behind my eyes. He looked composed, controlled, respectable. My father sat beside him, leaning in with instructions, his jaw tight, but his confidence unshaken. My mother sat behind them, hands clasped, trembling, but still choosing to sit with them instead of me. The betrayal pulsed in my chest with every breath. Ms. Langford touched my arm lightly, steering me toward our side of the room. "Sit here. Do not look at them if it hurts." I tried not to look. I failed, because when Daniel finally lifted his gaze and saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse. Something colder, something calculating, as if seeing me injured alive and sitting beneath the protection of the court offended him. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that gave away nothing. Everyone rose, then sat. The bailiff read the case number. The judge glanced at Daniel first. "Mr. Collins, you are being charged with felony assault, domestic strangulation, child endangerment, and witness intimidation. How do you plead?" Daniel stood smoothing the front of his shirt. "Not guilty, Your Honor." My chest tightened. Hearing him say it out loud, calm, confident, certain, made bile rise in my throat. The judge nodded, unimpressed. "Very well. Defense may begin." Daniel's attorney rose, buttoning his suit jacket. "Your Honor, my client maintains that this event was a terrible misunderstanding blown out of proportion due to heightened emotions on a holiday evening." He gestured toward Daniel as if presenting a model student. "Mr. Collins has no criminal record, comes from a respected family, and has been a dedicated father." The phrase "respected family" made my skin crawl. He continued. "The alleged victim has a history of emotional sensitivity which may have contributed to the escalation of events." My pulse spiked. Emotional sensitivity. Code words for her fault, her reaction, her instability. The attorney went on confident. "There is no evidence that proves intent to harm. The injuries could easily be consistent with an accidental fall, especially given the chaos of a holiday dinner. Collins may have misinterpreted certain physical interactions due to her emotional state." Ms. Langford rose so quickly, her chair scraped against the floor. "Your Honor, the prosecution is prepared to show clear evidence that contradicts the defense entirely." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Langford approached the bench with a calm, icy precision I had come to associate with her. "First," she said, "we will address the claim that Ms. Collins's injuries are consistent with a fall." She lifted a folder. Exhibit A, the medical report from St. Luke's Emergency Department. She handed it to the clerk, who passed copies to the defense attorney and the judge. The judge flipped through the pages, her expression tightening. Langford spoke clearly, each word deliberate. The abrasions around the victim's neck are consistent with manual strangulation. The pattern fits finger placement. There is bruising on both sides of the trachea and along the clavicular region. These cannot be caused by a fall. The judge's eyes lifted to the defense attorney. He cleared his throat, but said nothing. Langford continued. Exhibit B, photographs taken in the ER. Images appeared on the overhead screen. My neck, my arms, the dark, purpling fingerprints Daniel had left on my skin. The room fell silent. But the worst photo, the one that made the air leave my lungs, was the one of the side of my face where my head struck the table. Langford's voice remained steady. The victim also sustained a concussion. Impact height suggests a table edge. Video evidence supports this. The defense attorney stood abruptly. Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity of. The judge held up a hand. Sit down, counsel. He sat. Langford continued unshaken. Exhibit C, audio recorded from a tablet belonging to the minor child present at the scene. The moment she pressed play, a chill went through me. It was the same recording I had heard in the hospital, but hearing it in the courtroom made the memory slam back into my chest with brutal force. Daniel's voice yelling, my breath choking, a heavy thud, my mother's trembling whisper. If the police come, we say she slipped. She slipped. Daniel's cold response, she always does. A ripple of shock spread across the courtroom. Even the judge's expression shifted, her mouth tightening into a hard line. Langford paused to let the silence settle. Exhibit D, she said finally. Doorbell camera footage from the neighbor's home. The screen changed. The grainy video played. It showed Daniel dragging me inside, my knees buckling, his grip unrelenting. My chest tightened painfully as the memory merged with the image. Langford glanced toward the judge, and finally Exhibit E. She lifted a printed page. The defendant's internet search history from earlier that week. She read the line slowly, allowing every word to echo through the silent courtroom. How long until someone dies from strangulation? A gasp rippled through the room like a shockwave. The judge lifted her head sharply. The defense attorney froze, visibly shaken for the first time. Daniel's face drained of color. My heart pounded so hard the room felt suddenly too warm, too close, too alive with the truth that had been buried for years. Langford placed the paper down, her voice steady. Your Honor, the prosecution asserts that this was not an accident, not a misunderstanding, but a deliberate act of violence. The first half ends here. The silence that followed Ms. Langford's final words was not ordinary silence. It was dense, charged, the kind of silence that falls when the truth is so undeniable it steals the air from everyone's lungs. Every person in that courtroom sat frozen eyes fixed either on the screen, the judge, or on Daniel, who seemed to crumble by inches. His jaw twitched, his chest rising and falling faster, the confident veneer he had walked in with now slipping like wet paint. The judge closed the file slowly, as if to give herself time to absorb what she had just read. When she finally looked up, her eyes settled on Daniel with a weight that made him visibly flinch. Does the defense wish to respond? She asked, her tone perfectly neutral, though the undercurrent was unmistakably sharp. Daniel's attorney stood, but he moved like someone already defeated. His tie was crooked now, sweat gathering at his temple. Your Honor, he began weakly, we want to emphasize that internet searches do not automatically indicate intent. They may simply reflect curiosity or misunderstanding. The judge raised a hand abruptly. Curiosity, she repeated, incredulous. Counsel, do you expect me to believe that someone who allegedly witnessed his sister fall downstairs then searched how long until someone dies from strangulation purely out of curiosity? The attorney's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. You may sit, the judge said curtly. Ms. Langford stepped back, giving the defense space to flounder. Daniel shifted in his chair, fingers tapping nervously against the table. It was the first sign of panic I had ever seen from him. My father leaned in, whispering angrily into Daniel's ear, though I could not hear the words. My mother stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on nothing, her face ghost-like. The judge turned toward Ms. Langford. "The prosecution may call a witness if it chooses." Langford nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Officer Ramsey." The courtroom doors opened and Officer Ramsey stepped inside. Uniform, pressed posture, steady expression, sharp with purpose. He took the stand after being sworn in. Ms. Langford approached. "Officer, please describe the defendant's behavior at the scene." Ramsey answered clearly. "He was hostile and combative. He attempted to prevent us from assisting the victim and insisted that she had slipped despite evidence to the contrary." "Did he cooperate with the firearm seizure?" "No. He attempted to block officers from entering the home and escalated physically before being restrained." A murmur spread across the room. Langford continued. "Did the defendant make any statements prior to or during the arrest?" "Yes. He said, 'She always thinks she is the victim. She makes everything worse.'" Ramsey's gaze shifted toward Daniel. "And he said, 'She deserved it.'" A shocked gasp moved through the gallery. Daniel's face flushed deep red, his composure fracturing entirely. My stomach twisted painfully, but beneath it something else stirred validation. The truth was finally being spoken out loud without apology. Langford nodded. "Thank you, officer. You may step down." The judge gestured. "Defense may question the witness." Daniel's attorney attempted a weak salvage effort. "Officer, is it possible the defendant was simply overwhelmed or emotional?" Ramsey remained unshaken. "Emotional people do not strangle others, shove officers, manipulate witnesses, or search how long until someone dies from strangulation. Emotional people seek help. This was not emotion. This was violence." The attorney hesitated, then sat down defeated. Ms. Langford rose again. "Your Honor, the prosecution rests." The judge nodded, then turned toward Daniel. "Mr. Collins, do you wish to make a statement before the court considers the charges?" Daniel stood. His hands shook slightly as he smoothed his shirt again. He glanced at his attorney, then at his father, then slowly his eyes landed on me. A cold shiver ran through my spine. He inhaled sharply. "Your Honor." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I am not the monster they are trying to make me out to be." He swallowed hard. "My sister has always been dramatic. She twists things. The judge cut him off, her voice icy. "I am going to stop you right there." His mouth snapped shut. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Collins, I have reviewed the evidence. Medical reports, video footage, audio recordings, witness statements, internet search history, your behavior during and after the incident." She paused, letting the words settle, weighing heavily on him. "And I am telling you this clearly, this is one of the most disturbing domestic violence cases I have seen in recent years." Daniel's face paled. His knees nearly buckled. The judge continued. "Your actions were deliberate. Your attempts to manipulate the narrative were intentional, and your disregard for the safety of your child and sister is appalling." He lowered his head, but the tremor in his shoulders betrayed him. The judge shifted her attention toward my father. "Mr. Collins, Sr., please stand." My father stiffened, surprised. He stood reluctantly. The judge's voice sharpened. "Your behavior on the night of the incident was equally unacceptable. You attempted to interfere with law enforcement, obstructed the firearm seizure, and tried to pressure the victim. This court does not tolerate intimidation." My father swallowed, but his jaw remained set in defiance. The judge looked at my mother. "Mrs. Collins, please stand." My mother rose slowly, eyes shining with tears. "You remained silent during acts of violence. You supported a false narrative. You attempted to influence your daughter's statement. That silence is dangerous." My mother's chin quivered. I was scared." The judge softened only slightly. "Being scared does not absolve you of responsibility." She shifted back to Daniel. "Mr. Collins, based on the evidence presented, this court finds probable cause for all charges." The prosecutor exhaled quietly. Daniel's attorney dropped his pen. Daniel let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like disbelief. The judge's voice grew firm, leaving no room for debate. "Bail is denied due to the severity of the charges, the risk of escalation, and clear evidence of witness intimidation." Daniel's knees buckled and he had to grip the table to keep from collapsing. My father shouted, "This is outrageous!" The judge slammed her gavel once. "Sit down or you will be removed." The bailiff stepped forward ready. My father reluctantly sat, but fury seethed beneath his skin. The judge continued, "The defendant is remanded into custody until trial. A full no-contact order is issued for the victim and the minor child. Any violation will result in immediate additional charges." Daniel stared at me one last time, but for the first time in my life there was no power behind his gaze, only fear. The bailiffs moved toward him, securing his wrists in cuffs. My mother sobbed softly into her hands. My father glared at me with a look that tried and failed to shame me. As Daniel was led away, something inside me shifted. A weight lifted, a chain loosened. The truth had finally broken through the years of silence, denial, and manipulation, and for the first time, I felt the faint spark of something I never believed I would feel in connection to my family justice. The days after the hearing moved slowly, as if the world itself understood that healing could not be rushed. Even the sunlight filtering through my hospital blinds seemed softer, more patient, warming the room without overwhelming me. My body still ached in places I had not realized could hurt, and every movement reminded me of the violence that had nearly ended my life. But the hospital no longer felt like a place I was trapped in. It felt like a place I was rebuilding from. Therapy sessions began with cautious pace. Dr. Jennings returned every morning with that same calm presence sitting across from me, with her notepad resting loosely in her hands rather than held like a barrier. Every question she asked felt like a gentle invitation rather than an interrogation. "Emily," she said one morning, "now that the immediate danger has passed, your mind is trying to make sense of what happened. That is why the memories come in waves. Some will be sharp, some will be blurry, some will ambush you. That does not mean you are losing control. It means you are healing." Her words landed softly but powerfully. For years, I had believed that emotional reactions were weaknesses. That fear was dramatics. That remembering pain was an inconvenience. Because that was what I had been taught. Now, for the first time, fear felt like something human, not shameful. And healing felt like something possible, not a punishment. When she asked, "What do you feel when you think about your family?" I tried to answer honestly. "I feel empty," I whispered, "and tired, and angry." She nodded. "That is natural. That is honest. That is allowed." Allowed. A simple word, but one I had never been given permission to feel. She asked again, softer this time. "And what do you feel when you think about what comes next?" I closed my eyes. Images drifted through my mind. Anna's tearful little face in the doorway. Ramsey's steady voice. My mother's trembling silence. Daniel's final look in the courtroom. I did not feel fear. I felt something else. I think I feel free. The tears came quickly after that, but these were different. Not tears of panic or confusion or helplessness. Tears of release. Dr. Jennings nodded gently. "Freedom can be painful at first, but it gets lighter." Later that afternoon, a social worker brought updates about Anna. "She is staying with a foster family for now," she explained, "but she keeps asking about you. She wants to know if you are safe." My heart tightened at the thought. I asked if she could visit. The social worker smiled. "Yes, but only after you are discharged and settled somewhere safe." Somewhere safe. The phrase echoed in my mind, foreign but comforting. When I was finally discharged a week later, the hospital helped arrange a temporary domestic violence recovery apartment. It was small but peaceful, painted in warm colors with thick rugs that muffled sound. There was a single-bedroom clean sheets and a living room with a worn but comfortable couch. For the first time in my life, I stepped into a space that belonged to me alone. Silence greeted me without judgment. No footsteps, no raised voices, no tension crawling under the walls. I stood in the middle of the small living room, my hand still holding the doorknob, and breathed. The air did not feel dangerous. I was allowed to breathe here, allowed to exist, allowed to be. Over the next few days, I built a small routine. I made tea in the quiet mornings, sitting by the window and letting sunlight warm my face. I took short walks outside to regain strength in my legs. I sat with a blanket on the couch when the memories resurfaced, letting myself feel them instead of burying them. And every night I reminded myself, you are not in that house anymore. You did not imagine what happened. You survived it. One of the biggest milestones came when Anna was cleared to visit. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon clutching her small backpack and looking both nervous and hopeful. When the social worker stepped aside and she saw me standing in the doorway, her entire face lit up. Aunt Emily. The way she said my name with relief rather than fear nearly broke me. I dropped to my knees and opened my arms. She ran into them without hesitation, burying her face in my shoulder. I held her tightly, feeling her small body tremble. I missed you so much, she whispered. I missed you too, sweetheart. She pulled back enough to look at my bruises, her eyes filled with concern. Does it still hurt? Sometimes I said honestly, but I am getting better. She nodded as if she understood something far deeper than a child her age should have to understand. We spent the afternoon drawing with the colored pencils the foster family had sent with her. She sketched simple shapes and holiday scenes, but one drawing she handed me made my breath catch in my throat. It was a picture of me standing with her under a Christmas tree. Above us was a small line of shaky handwriting. Safe now. My eyes burned as I looked at it. It was the first drawing in my life where I was not alone, where I was not crying, where someone small and brave had put me in a picture worth keeping. Anna looked up at me. Are we going to be okay? I tucked her hair behind her ear. Yes. We are. Later, when she left, I placed the drawing on the nightstand beside my bed. It felt like a symbol, fragile but real. Another milestone came when my mother requested to see me. For days, I wrestled with the idea. Part of me wanted to refuse. Part of me feared hearing more excuses. But another part needed closure, needed to understand whether she would remain frozen in silence or finally step into truth. When she arrived, she looked smaller. Her shoulders curved inward, her eyes filled with guilt rather than denial. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. Emily, she said softly, I am so sorry. Her voice cracked. I should have protected you. I should have spoken up. I should have been stronger. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she admitted I let fear control me. I let your father and Daniel decide everything. I thought silence would keep the peace, but all it did was protect them and hurt you. Hearing her say it did not erase the pain of the past. It did not rebuild trust instantly, but it allowed me to breathe, allowed something inside me to loosen. I nodded gently. You cannot change the past, but you can change what you do now. She reached for my hand with trembling fingers, and for the first time in years, I did not pull away. The nightmares did not disappear overnight. Some mornings I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, remembering flashes of Christmas Eve. But each night, the dreams lost a little of their power. And each morning, the sunlight through the window reminded me I was not trapped. I was not alone. I was healing, bit by bit, day by day. And with each step forward, I felt something grow inside me that I never expected to feel again: hope. Christmas Eve arrived again almost exactly 1 year after the night that had nearly destroyed me, and the air outside carried that familiar cold bite, the kind that crept quietly beneath clothing and settled into the bones. But unlike the year before, the cold did not feel threatening. It felt fresh, clean, like the beginning of something instead of the end of everything. The small recovery apartment had become warmer over the months, not because of any physical change, but because it had grown familiar. The cozy living room with its soft lighting and worn couch felt like a sanctuary rather than a temporary shelter, a space shaped slowly by healing and quiet moments that belonged only to me. This year, Christmas Eve did not smell like fear. It smelled like cinnamon tea, the kind that filled the air with soft sweetness as it steeped on the counter. It sounded like gentle laughter instead of shouting. It glowed with soft string lights draped loosely along the wall, not the blinding staged perfection of last year's holiday display. And it looked like something new, something chosen. My mother arrived early in the afternoon carrying a small bag of groceries she insisted on buying despite my telling her I had everything we needed. When she stepped inside, she paused, taking in the warmth of the room with a soft, almost relieved smile. "It really is beautiful here," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the peace. I gave her a small hug. "Thank you for coming." She squeezed my hand gently. I would not have been anywhere else. There was no fear in her voice this time, no hesitation, only quiet determination. We worked together in the small kitchen, preparing simple dishes, nothing elaborate. No roast, no choreographed performance of happiness, just roasted vegetables, warm soup, and fresh bread from a local bakery. At one point, my mother paused with a knife in her hand, staring down at the carrots she was slicing. Her voice softened to nearly a whisper. "Emily, thank you for letting me be part of this. I know I failed you for a long time. I know my apologies cannot erase everything, but I want to spend the rest of my life making sure I never repeat the same silence again." I glanced at her, seeing how far she had come from the trembling woman who had sat behind Daniel in the courtroom. "You are trying," I said gently. "That matters." She nodded, blinking back tears. A soft knock came at the door just as we finished setting the table. I opened it to find Anna standing there, bundled in a puffy coat, cheeks rosy from the cold. Her foster mother stood behind her, smiling warmly. Anna lifted her small backpack and grinned. "I brought my drawing pad." I laughed softly and stepped aside so she could enter. Her foster mother gave me a reassuring nod. "She is all yours for the evening. I will pick her up after dinner." "Thank you," I said. "Truly." When the door closed behind her, Anna ran into the apartment, spinning once in delight at the string lights. "It looks pretty," she said. Not like before. Before. That single word carried an entire world of meaning, but neither of us needed to unpack it tonight. My mother bent down to hug her. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Anna hugged her tightly, then pulled back to look up at me. "Are we making cookies?" I smiled. "We are making lots of things. But first, dinner." We gathered around the small table, just three of us. No performance, no tension, no fear, just warmth. My mother led a quiet moment of gratitude before we ate. She spoke softly, her voice trembling only with sincerity. "I am grateful for safety, for healing, and for second chances. I am grateful for the people who survived the darkness and still chose to seek light." Her hand brushed mine under the table. I squeezed it gently. The evening flowed in a way that felt surreal, peaceful, unforced, genuine. After dinner, Anna pulled out her drawing pad and crayons and sat cross-legged on the rug. She began sketching while humming softly to herself, a soft tune that drifted through the apartment like a blessing. My mother washed dishes while I dried them, our movements synchronized in a gentle rhythm that felt almost like we had always done it this way even though we never had. Later, Anna tapped my arm. "I made you something." She handed me a drawing. It was a picture of three figures standing together beside a small Christmas tree. One figure was me. One was her. The last was my mother. Above us, in her slightly uneven handwriting, she had written, "This Christmas nobody hurts you." My heart tightened so sharply I had to take a breath before I could speak. "Thank you, sweetheart. This means everything." She climbed onto the couch beside me and leaned her head against my shoulder. For a moment, I simply let myself exist in that warm, quiet world. My mother joined us, sitting on the other side of Anna, her eyes soft as she looked at the drawing. I rested my hand on Anna's back and let myself feel the fullness of the moment. Safe, whole, connected. When Anna's foster mother arrived to pick her up, she hugged me tightly before leaving, whispering, "I wish every day felt like today." I hugged her back. Me too. After they left, my mother and I stood by the window watching snow begin to fall. The flakes drifted slowly, illuminated by the streetlights, turning the world soft and quiet. My mother spoke in a low voice. "I used to think Christmas had to be perfect, that everything had to look right, even if it felt wrong. I thought that was the only way to keep the peace. Now I realize peace is not something you display. It is something you live." I nodded. "This feels real." "It does," she said. "And I hope this is the first of many nights like this." A warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the heating vent. I looked at her, then at the small room filled with quiet joy, then back at the snow falling gently outside. For the first time since childhood, Christmas Eve did not feel like a stage built on fear. It felt like a new beginning, a life rebuilt from truth rather than silence, a holiday I could claim as my own. And as I turned off the lights later and lay under the soft blankets, one thought settled quietly into my heart, warm and steady. Family is not who shares your blood. Family is who keeps you safe. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after the people you trusted hurt you, tell me your story. You're not invisible. You're not alone. I'm listening.